Action. Alright. Let me get this up on my other electronic device here.
Good evening, everyone.
Well, hello there. We gotta break the ice here.
Yeah, sorry for the few minute delay. We had some heavy rains here. Just dealing with, our internet connection.
It's the internet's fault. It's okay.
Yeah, it's not our fault.
I think we're good now.
Yeah.
I think... Yeah, okay. I think you should be able to hear us okay. If not, please let us know in the chat before we get started. It's always better to let us know that we have audio issues like 2 minutes into the chat instead of 2 hours.
Yeah, that could be.
That could be a little rough. I'm gonna give people a couple minutes to file in, and then we'll get started at about 10 after.
That
proper
works for
with
me.
The show.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow, this episode was 250 years in the making. What's another 10 minutes, right?
Well, what's the rush, This place has been here for 250 years, and 10 minutes isn't even a blink of an eye, right?
Yeah. And that's just for the incorporated Harford County. That's not factoring in, billions of years that Earth has been here.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, there weren't U.S. roots like 15,000 years ago. Otherwise, we could have talked about that tonight instead.
That's true.
Hunter-gatherer trunk roots.
All right.
Well, it's good to have you folks with us tonight for a special presentation. This is being done under the banner of a virtual tour episode on the Roadway Whiz YouTube channel, but we are doing something a little different tonight than what we usually do. Normally we focus on freeways and major urban areas and other major highways of interest around America, but this year, Harford County, Maryland is celebrating its 250th anniversary, and I kind of thought that it would be a good idea to do a show kind of around that whole celebration. That is a year-long thing that started recently, and it'll be going on throughout the year 2023. So, to help me out with the proceedings this evening, those of you who are familiar with my channel, you have heard her voice many times on our live shows already. And if you haven't, that's okay too, because she's really wonderful, I promise.
Well, thank you.
She is Laura Bianca Pruitt,
Yes.
affiliated with AARoads.com.
Yes.
And she is very familiar with Harford County, all the ins and outs and all that, as I'm sure she'll tell you over the next couple of hours tonight. Laura, welcome back to the show. It's nice to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back, Dan. It is always a pleasure to be here. I am just extra excited to do this episode. For those of you who may or may not know, I work as a town planner for the town of Bel Air, which is the county seat of Harford County, Maryland. And I'm on the steering committee for the Harford 250th anniversary celebration. So, Dan and I have done many episodes together, and I pitched this one and said, hey, why don't we do something a little different to celebrate my hometown, home county love? And
She has a lot of that, by the way.
a lot. And, it's amazing how putting this presentation together, just how much history and material and everything there is. It's hard to pare it down into one evening.
Yeah, it's we actually when we were putting this together, we were coming up with stuff to talk about, and we very quickly realized that we were going to have way too much on our hands to actually put into a 2-hour show tonight. So, what we're going to try to do tonight is give you as best of an overview as we can of the two U.S. highways that will be traveling virtually in the second half of the program, U.S. Routes 1 and 40. We'll be traveling their lengths through Harford County. We'll also be diving into some other things like old alignments, historical landmarks, even some architecture stuff. We'll work that in for those of you who are into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I am. So a lot of what I do is actually historic preservation planning for the town of Bel Air, and so I just have a huge love for historic properties. And you know what sort of inspired me to also do this presentation was looking back at the old old guidebooks, in particular one from 1940, and of Maryland, and basically I just sort of kind of planned this out as like, oh, what if we took a guide today in 2023 but also through history. So what's cool is this is a companion to an in-person road meet in 2 weeks. They're going to both be a little bit different, but it's going to be a lot of really great and fun material.
Can't wait.
Let's get started.
It's going to be fun. You want to get started?
Let's
get
do it.
started. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's take off here. First, some information about Harford County as a whole. The population is about 261,000 per the 2020 census estimate. The county is 527 square miles in all. That is including water. So I think the land area is about 450 square miles, and about 90 square miles of it is, or 80 square miles is underwater. The county seat is Bel Air, which is where we happen to be doing this show tonight. The largest city by population in the county is Aberdeen. The largest employer in the county is the Aberdeen Proving Ground, who I believe employs about 15,000 people altogether.
Yeah.
Prior to Western settlers and civilization moving in, this land, just like any other land in North America, was inhabited by indigenous people. The leading tribe here was a tribe by the name of the Susquehannocks, and you might recognize that name because we basically took that name and applied it to the river that now forms the eastern border of Harford County, the Susquehanna River.
That's right. So, Harford County, also, known locally as Harco, was founded in 1773 and named for Henry Harford. So Henry Harford was the illegitimate son of Frederick Calvert, who was the 6th Lord Baltimore, and his mistress. So
juicy detail there.
Very juicy details. So he inherited his father's estates in 1771, but then the revolution happened in 1776. But he is now remembered because just conveniently in between those 5 years, this county was incorporated and named for him.
It has his name, right?
Yep. So, considering this is Harford 250, thought it might be worth kind of taking a minute to talk about how the county became a county. So, originally, Harford County was the eastern part of Baltimore County. And what's interesting is that there were a few settlements in the area that's now Aberdeen Proving Ground that were early county seats. And then there was one called Joppa that was, which we'll talk about much more later, which is, near the Joppa and Joppa town of today, but was its own settlement. It's now an archaeological site on the Gunpowder River. Well, anyway, that was the county seat until it was moved to Baltimore in 1768. So at that point, the people in eastern Baltimore County were upset that now they had to travel pretty far. So they decided to have proceedings for county division. And that happened in between November and December of 1773. And then it went into effect March 22nd, 1774. The first county seat was Bush, also known as Harford Town, on Post Road. We'll talk about Post Road a lot more because that ultimately is earliest alignment of Route 40. The Bush Declaration is an important piece of history here. It was a document very similar to the Declaration of Independence, but signed by the local leaders here in Hartford, as well as one of the signers, at least one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence on March 22nd, 1775. Also happened on Post Road. And then the county seat was moved to Bel Air on January 22nd, 1782, along the predecessor of US 1. So it's been there since, but both Harford County seats have been on the two major highways.
Yeah, the earliest iterations of them, right?
Yeah?
Yeah, so here's kind of a blown up version of what was on the previous slide. You can see Harford County highlighted or outlined in red here. You see that the eastern border is the Susquehanna River, the northern border is the state line with Pennsylvania, also known around here as the Mason-Dixon line. The western border is the Little Gunpowder Falls, and Baltimore County is to the west. And you have, of course, the northern reaches of Chesapeake Bay to the south.
Yeah, so we mentioned about the Susquehannock people earlier. Basically, the estimates from when they first arrived in the area range from thousands of years ago to the 16th century. Their livelihood centered around the Susquehanna River. And as you see in this map that was published in 1935, they had their own network of trails, including one that follows along the US 1 corridor. And just north of the Conowingo Dam was a settlement at Bald Friar. And there were also petroglyphs that were found in that area. So in the colonial era, basically the earliest colonial roads were actually the waterways, the bay and its many rivers and streams. And so there were actually laws first regarding ferries before there were laws regarding roads. So the first public conveyance for a ferry was in Maryland was in 1639. Worth mentioning date-wise here, 1608 is when the first English explorer, John Smith, sailed up the Chesapeake Bay. And then in 1634 is when the Ark and the Dove came. So 5 years of British settlement, you already had the first public conveyance for a ferry. And it took till 1666 for the first road law, which entitled An Act for Making Highways and Making the Heads of Rivers, Creeks, Branches, and Swamps Passable for Horse and Foot.
I guess they didn't establish a national speed limit in that law.
No.
Yeah, okay.
A
little early for that.
A little early for that. I suppose if they did a speed limit, it'd be what, like 3 miles an hour?
I don't know. What's the average pace of a horse and buggy? I don't know.
I don't actually know.
I don't know. They do ride pretty fast in Pennsylvania Dutch country nowadays, though.
They do.
Those of you who are familiar with that area know what I'm talking about.
So, in 1695, a regular post route was established from the Potomac River to Philadelphia via Annapolis, which was the predecessor of today's Route 40. So in 1704 is when rulemaking power was first granted to the counties. And what's interesting is you had your first public transportation, which back then was via stagecoaches, by 1765. But as I said earlier, regarding how waterways were still considered like more important than roadways, what's interesting is the first stagecoach route had 2 of the 3 legs of the journey were by water. And then in 1787, the rough alignment of today's Route 1 was first surveyed by John Eager Howard to connect the Port of Baltimore with farms across Harford County to southern PA. John Eager Howard later became a governor of Maryland, and he is, fun fact, the only person to have 3 streets named after him in Baltimore City. John Street, Eager Street, Howard Street.
How about that?
Yeah. But yeah, so these early roads were pretty bad and got worn out really, really quickly and became an issue in wet and rainy seasons and often became impassable. So the first public turnpikes were authorized by the legislator in 1787. And then by 1804 is when the legislator authorized private toll companies to build and operate turnpikes. And there were many turnpikes that came out of Baltimore and connected to Philadelphia and other cities. The two that were in Hartford, the there were more than two, but two that happened to be in Hartford were along US 1 and US 40. I wonder why that is.
Yeah. Well, they recognized from very early on that these two corridors were going to be important, not just locally, but also regionally in the colonies. And then early 1800s, nationally in the United States, along the eastern seaboard.
Yeah.
And that's something that is very interesting to track, because as we said, going back to even indigenous times, there were trails that roughly follow, the main roads of today. So
yeah,
it's just something that knowledge-wise was transferred from generation to generation and finds its presence here today.
Yeah, it's what's really interesting about so 1814 was the Baltimore and Havre de Grace Turnpike, which again was the post road and much more wider, updated version. But the turnpikes along the US 1 corridor were a little bit different than what you think of as US 1 today. So by 1825, you had the Bel Air Turnpike, which went from Benson to Bel Air, and you had the Baltimore and Jerusalem Turnpike. So just to give a little background is that instead of just taking US 1 straight up Bel Air Road as it is today, the turnpike, when it got to Kingsville, which is in Baltimore County near the line, it would turn onto Jerusalem Road, and that went to Jerusalem Mills. And from there, it then went north on Old Joppa Road. So Bel Air Turnpike was a separate one from Benson to Bel Air. And then you also had the Baltimore and Hartford Turnpike, which is Hartford Road. That was another turnpike that has its own elaborate history. Mm-hmm. And that one follows the Indigenous Trail, whereas Route 1 was definitely designed to be a much straighter from the get-go road. Oh, before we turn the slide, this is the Greystone Lodge on the on today's Bel Air Road at the corner of Old Joppa and Bel Air Road, and it dates back to the 18th century. It was a coach builder's shop, and with Quaker craftsmanship, and it was also a building used as a as a tavern and restaurant, and later a motor lodge, as traffic increased on the road.
Fast forwarding to the 20th century.
Yes. So, fast forwarding to the 20th century. Turnpikes were very hard to maintain. They were very expensive to maintain. And as a result, canals and then later railroads competed heavily against them. So by the early 20th century, a lot of the turnpikes in Maryland in this area the turnpike companies were really struggling. So the General Assembly formed in 1908 the State Roads Commission, which today is Maryland State Highway Administration. But it was basically to take ownership of the failing turnpikes as well as other roads from the counties to be maintained on the state level. And so pretty much right away, they started paving sections of, at this point known as Bel Air Road and Baltimore Pike, US 1, and then Philadelphia Road and the Post Road, US 40, in the 1910s. And then these roads became part of the U.S. highway system in 1927.
1927, which was a year later than most other states established their U.S. highway corridors and numbering. Maryland was one of the last states to the party as far as signing US 1, for instance.
Yeah.
That didn't happen until the following year. Most literature you read cites 1926, but that's the national creation of the system. In Maryland, it was a bit more later to follow.
Yeah. So so this map is actually a map that my husband Mike Pruitt created, and Mike is actually in the chat. So
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike. So he's there to help answer questions, provide extra facts, and things that we might forget or might accidentally mess up.
Mike is, of course, the webmaster of mdroads.com.
Yes.
So that's been his baby for what, 15 years, 20 years?
Longer than that, since 1998.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, he created this map, and you'll have to say in the chat, Mike, what year specifically this is. It's in the 1940s. But as you can see, as we just mentioned, the U.S. highways were created in 1927, and then the state is, populating all of its own other routes. And a funny thing kind of happened in Maryland as it started developing its highway system, is that by the mid-1930s, it focused on, as you can see, a lot of secondary rural routes as opposed to primary highways. They emphasized that they wanted no area to be more than 2 miles from some sort of paved road. And so as a result, you see all of these, state highways, many of which are no longer maintained by the state, but and have gone back to Harford County maintenance. But as a result, they left US 1 and US 40 woefully inadequate, with a ton of traffic, getting a ton of wear and tear. And so by 1935, they realized, this is a problem. And so they created a program to fit the roads to the traffic that they were carrying. And this prompted the construction of a new Philadelphia road, Pulaski Highway.
Mm-hmm.
And then also Route 1, as we'll talk a little more later, for it to go through various upgrades and plans for upgrades throughout the coming decades. But before you turn, I want to show what's also really cool about this map. And we'll, again, talk about more when we dig into each route, is that you can actually see some of the old alignments of the original roads. So if we let's look at US 1, and let's start in the southwest corner, right? So going north from Little Gunpowder Falls, you can see where where Maryland 147 is coming in. That's where Baltimore and Harford Turnpike was, right? So then Route 1 going through Bel Air. And then as you're getting north, you see a route, Maryland 590. That's Forge Hill Road, and is an old alignment. Then as you get further north, you see 162 on the Harford side, and then 273 on the Cecil side. That was the original pre-Conowingo Dam alignment of US 1.
That's where the old village was.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. And then if we go back down to Route 40 and start down in the southwest, right, you see where Maryland 7 is. And going along, and then it kind of pops over to 159, and then you see a gap. It's because some of the Old Post Road is under county maintenance. But then it goes to, and again, because this map is old, it shows it as Maryland 22, which is later Maryland 132. Mm-hmm. But today's Maryland 132. So that's another old alignment. And then when you get towards Havre de Grace, you see Maryland 490. And again, that's the original 7 and 490, the original alignment in Havre de Grace. And then you see 7 on the other side. And that's where they used to connect and cross. So, let's dig in.
Let's get specific about both US 1 and US 40.
Yes. So, US 1 is 20 miles in length in Harford County. connects the county seat, Bel Air, with Greater Baltimore and with Baltimore City in particular. It, as mentioned, today it crosses, and has since 1928, crosses the Susquehanna River at the Conowingo Dam. What's interesting is that when the state roads commission started taking on highways, they actually designated the original route for US 1 as State Route number 1. So it never had a different number. They always saw it as like the most important and first priority route. But yeah, over the years we'll see how it evolves into modern thoroughfare. Bypasses of Bel Air were constructed in the 1960s, and in Hickory in 2000, which then left the old alignment to be US 1 business. And then, interestingly, something that I don't know that a lot of people even locally know, is that all of US 1 in Harford County, basically all of US 1 north of where Paring Parkway ends in Baltimore County, was planned to be the Paring Freeway, and was going to be a freeway connecting into the freeway in once you cross from Cecil County into Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so another freeway to connect Baltimore with Philadelphia, except inland or northwest of I-95.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, the highlights along the route, as we said, it goes a little bit further north through the center part of the county, traveling from Little Gunpowder Falls, and then through Fallston, although the historic part of Fallston is just north of Route 1, but all the businesses along there are kind of considered Fallston today. Then we get to Benson, which is also known as Jones Junction due to the huge Jones Junction dealerships that have built up from about 1973 to 2014 when they bought each lot in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And then we mentioned at the end is Conowingo Dam. But something else that I think is a really cool highlight on this route, is very unique, is the Jostin Gorsuch House. So this was a house that was originally off of Tollgate Road, just outside of the town of Bel Air. The date of construction was originally is estimated to be as early as 1730, but it was in danger of demolition. And so in 2016, Harford County made a huge effort with historic preservationists to dismantle the house piece by piece and label it and move it 11 miles north to Street, Maryland on US 1. And it and as you can see, the size of the house is it's a little bit smaller, and part of that is because the intent was to only that they could really only salvage the original section of the house. Although, interestingly, some of the pieces were not in good shape in the original section of the house, so they used some of the better quality pieces to fill some gaps in on the house. But anyway, so the intent of the previous administration was to make it a museum, and then behind it are the Harford County agricultural offices, and then there is kind of adjacent to it this agribusiness incubator that the previous administration also formed. Right now, the Jostin Gorsuch House and what was called the Grove at Harford are kind of in a transition period with the new administration. But if nothing else, it is just very stunning to be driving up on Route 1 and to say, whoa, where did this house come from? So you're like, it looks old, but it's something about it seems like, was it actually built there?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a very fascinating story. I find that to be a neat kind of historical highlight.
Here's some pictures of the Bel Air bypass section of US 1. Mostly built to freeway standards around the Bel Air area, although not exclusively. There are at-grade intersections in places. You'll also notice that this highway is not built to full standard width for a normal freeway. This is, in most cases, called what you would call a Super 2 freeway, which is that there's 2 lanes instead of the standard 4 or more lanes for freeway traffic. You do have lanes for exits and entrances, like you have in these pictures here, but by and large there's mainly 1 lane per direction for through traffic. This was done intentionally. When they built the original bypass, traffic counts in this area were pretty low. Harford County was not the bedroom community full county that it is today for Metro Baltimore. So traffic counts were low compared to what they were forecast to be in the future. So to save some money, they basically built half of a freeway. They built 1 roadway for 2 lanes of traffic, and there's enough right-of-way set aside that they could expand this highway to 4 lanes or more in the future if traffic counts ever warranted it. But Maryland had other priorities at the time in the 1960s. They were still battling it out in Baltimore City, for instance, over what they were going to do with certain freeway corridors in that area. And those were seen as much higher priority projects than a full-scale freeway along US 1 through Bel Air. So what you kind of have here is, kind of like a hybrid solution, where it's limited access in parts, but it's also not quite built out in full scale, unlike a lot of other freeways in the state of Maryland. Further north in Hickory, again, you have it's a bypass, but it's more of an at-grade divided highway than a freeway. So you have at-grade intersections here with the former alignment of US 1, which is now signed as Business 1 in the area, and also signalized intersections and intervals with Maryland Highway 23, for instance, and also 543 further to the northeast. And then we have my favorite part of US 1 in Harford County.
Yes. Conowingo Dam.
We got to talk about the dam.
Yes.
So the dam has been with us since 1928. It's a significant landmark in the area. It's pretty important from a hydropower standpoint. The dam's construction forced the relocation and removal of the original village of Conowingo, which was located upstream of the dam location. It's now sitting at the bottom of Conowingo Lake. How deep is the lake, by the way?
It's very deep. So that area it's kind of bizarre. That area was actually kind of cliffs. It's hard to imagine because now it doesn't seem like it. It just seems like a giant lake. But it's like 100 feet above sea level.
Yeah, because I know the dam is pretty tall, so it's got to be at least that high, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, so US 1 was originally, very briefly, on a different alignment that went through the village of Conowingo, and then when the dam was built, it was shifted onto the roadway that now runs across the top of the dam. And then there was a time when the old alignment on the Harford County side was designated as Maryland Highway 162. But that designation was subsequently removed.
Yes. Mike will have to confirm in the chat, but I want to say it was probably removed by like the 50s?
I think early 50s sounds about right.
There were a lot of decommissionings in the 1950s.
Yeah, so the spillway's elevation is 109 feet above sea level. Thank you, Mike. I mentioned hydroelectric power being a big factor here. It was also built for flood control purposes. The lower Susquehanna communities, especially those in Maryland, like Port Deposit, Havre de Grace, Perryville, they were prone to seasonal flooding of the Susquehanna in the springtime. So the dam was constructed also for flood control purposes, and there are spillway gates all along it. You can't really see them from here, but there are a significant number of those. And also the hydroelectric power is a big plus for northeastern Maryland as well. Again, this is one of my favorite drives in northeastern Maryland, going across the dam, because we have a lot of roads that go across rivers on bridges, and we don't have that many, at least in my part of the country, that go over dams. So this is kind of a unique experience.
It really is.
Yeah, we got to talk about the neon sign too.
Oh, I love the neon sign.
Isn't that great?
It's so great.
It's I guess it's been there all these years. I mean, I don't
actually know the history behind the sign.
I don't either, but it seems like the kind of thing that they would have put up when the dam was built, and then it's always been there.
Yeah.
But you can certainly see it from quite a distance at night when it's lit up like that.
Yeah. So let's talk some more about the Perry Freeway.
Yes, we alluded to this a few minutes ago.
Yeah. So this is this is a map illustration of the 1969 Harford County Comprehensive Plan. The yellow is the proposed alignment for the Perry Freeway, and then the blue is the original pre-bypass US 1. So you could kind of get a feel for, and you could where the freeway was going to go. So it was going to be, if we're starting again in the southwest corner, it was going to be actually north of both US 1 and Maryland 147 Harford Road. And then it was going to connect in with the piece in Benson, just north of Benson, that is 4 lanes. There's a very small piece that is 4 lanes until you get to Winter's Run. And then it merges down to 2 lanes to cross over, become the rest of the bypass. So basically, while not built fully out to the freeway, as we said, it was at least built to, there was some sort of bypass built to Hickory, but nothing north of that got built. It wasn't completed due to the lack of traffic volume. And it's just very interesting because part of the alignment would have just been the existing alignment north of Hickory, just upgraded. But then when we got near Deer Creek, it would have gone actually a little bit south. And then got to Dublin, gone north, and then stayed north. And interestingly, the crossing would have been near the pre-Conowingo Dam crossing.
Yeah, it kind of would have gone right where the old village was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's another map. This one is from the 1969 Town of Bel Air Comprehensive Plan. And as you can see, there's the Perry Freeway. It's going to be the northern freeway connection to Philadelphia. And then you have I-95 in the south. And then you have US 24, which was built in pieces and opened in 1987. But again, most of that is at grade. But then, as you see, there's also the East-West Expressway. That actually would have gone all the way from Hagerstown and terminated east in Aberdeen. So there are little pieces of it that are built in Harford County. There's the East-West Highway that goes from just south of Jarrettsville to Hickory, which we'll see the eastern terminus of on our drive. And then there's the bit of the Aberdeen Thruway that was built near Aberdeen. So as you can see, the planned highway network did not come to fruition.
Yeah. But it's okay. It's cool, though, to look at the maps of what they were thinking about doing.
It is. And I really like looking at these interchange plans with what was called Maryland 24 Relocated. So it's very interesting because on all of the maps and even in like the GIS data, it's, the current alignment of Maryland 24 is considered Maryland 24 Relocated, and 924 is, the old 24. But it's just mind-blowing to look at these interchange plans. So right now, Maryland 24 comes into the bypass at a traffic light. And as you can see, there are looking at the Town of Bel Air plans, they planned for these full interchanges that not just connected 24 and the bypass, but also connected into the northern part of the town of Bel Air. And a big there's some reasons why this didn't happen. One is that what they were planning to do was to use the abandoned Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad alignment. But it would have gone through what is today Heavenly Waters Park and where the Leary-Dendron Mansion is. So it would have drastically reduced parkland. And the right-of-way was actually not a full right-of-way. It was just an easement. So, I think I'm glad because it's such a beautiful area. Like, it would have just completely changed Bel Air to have that freeway connection and not for the better. It would have filtered people outside of Main Street.
This is right around the time, too, late 60s, when the environmental movement was getting started and people were starting to realize the importance of having green spaces in urban areas.
Yes.
Especially on waterfronts and similar spots. So, yeah, this trend also applied on a more local level also.
So what's interesting is, in 1995, there were some revived plans to build an interchange again. And they were looking at a way to do it without using any more right-of-way. So they came up with this very tight interchange with 124 and with Vale Road. And again, there were still these plans that they thought north of town, like if you look at where number 11 is, that's where the East-West Expressway.
Yeah, still a dotted line there.
Still a dotted line there. They were still thinking that late that it could happen.
Yeah. The map on the left looks like something I drew in first grade. But it is interesting how planners and engineers come up with some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most fascinating stuff is the stuff that never sees the light of day.
Yes.
That I think we kind of take for granted the stuff that exists today because we see it.
Right.
If it's in its physical form. But it's kind of neat to think about what people were thinking about outside of what actually physically exists today. Anyway, Business 1, which, as you might imagine or might have guessed, is an old alignment of US 1 through the town of Bel Air. This section of Business 1 in Bel Air runs about 7 miles from Benson in the south to Hickory in the north, and it runs through downtown Bel Air. It multiplexes with Maryland Highway 924 through downtown, which is the old alignment of Maryland 24 before the relocation. The relocation happened in the late 80s?
1987.
1987, yeah. Yeah, so that recently was the switch.
24 and I are the same age.
Yeah. Not that old.
I am 5 months older.
So.
Yeah, not a whole lot to say, although interestingly, it's, it was temporarily designated as Maryland 147 before they gave it the Business 1.
Maybe, do you know the reason why Maryland does green business route shields?
That is a Mike question.
Yeah.
But I will say that Route 1 was the first one to do it.
Really?
Yes. They were the first one to do it. Mike can probably
Mike probably knows the answer to that.
Yeah. But let's talk about some US 1 business architectural highlights.
I'd love to.
Yay! So, this is the hardest thing about doing this presentation, because as a historic preservation planner, I could probably literally tell you, let me tell you about each single individual house on this street.
You could tell us the history of every building in the town, probably.
Probably. So it's very hard to pick a select few. And so, but I tried. So I picked 2 that were in the town of Bel Air and 2 that are in Hickory, of significant importance. So the first one, these are then and now pictures. First one is the Harford County Courthouse. So that was the second courthouse on the site. The first one was in 1791. As you can see, there were There was at least one addition put on the front. There was also another addition that was put on the back of the courthouse. But gorgeous courthouse square area right on Main Street in the heart of downtown Bel Air. Then we have the Van Bibber House, which is the oldest house still on its original foundation in the town of Bel Air, dating to 1788. What's very fascinating about this house, as you can see from the then and now picture, is that the building that's directly to the right of it is actually attached. So what's interesting from the guiding wisdom in the 1980s was that when you put an addition on to a historic building, the idea was you want to make it look as absolutely different as possible so that it's clear as day that it, is not part of the historic structure. So that's why you have, they don't even look like they should be connected. But you have this 1788 house and this late 1980s, 200 years later, addition onto it that is shops. And it's interesting too, to the left, there's another addition, as well as there was a bank drive-through that's on the back of the building. So moving on to Hickory, St. Ignatius Catholic Church was first constructed in 1792. It's the oldest Catholic church in the Archdiocese of Baltimore in continuous operation. As you can see in the now picture, they built a huge new church building that opened in 2001. It's one of the largest Catholic parishes. That's another question Mike could answer in the chat. He probably knows if it's like the largest. But it's, again, very fascinating history that it started as this rural church, and then as Harford County, grew in population post-World War II, sort of grew exponentially and then became, now one of the largest churches probably in the Archdiocese. Mm. So the last picture here, this is the Central Consolidated School. This was the Central Consolidated School was one of two schools from 1951 to 1965-66 that if you were a Black American, that you could go from grades K through 12 in Harford County. And Harford County actually, unfortunately, does not have a good history regarding segregation and integration of schools. They were the last county in Maryland to desegregate. What's interesting is that the Central Consolidated School was actually converted into what is now Hickory Elementary School today. And so the building is not just still in use, but there have been additions put onto it. So there's just a selection of highlights.
I think it covers all the bases.
I think so. Speaking of civil rights history.
Oh, yes.
And for those of you who may be new to the channel, I really enjoy talking a lot about civil rights history in regards to roads and highways and transportation. And Bel Air has a very unique example.
Yeah, I'll say.
Civil rights and the civil rights movement and its connection to turnpikes. So H. Brown was... Let me pull up my notes on this because I don't want to mess this up. So in 1970, H. Brown, he was a civil rights leader. He was well known to be pretty militant and the leader of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCC. He faced trial for arson and indictment based on an incident of riots in Cambridge, Maryland, that occurred in 1967, but due to heavy amount of protests and civil rights events going on, the trial was moved to Bel Air from Cambridge. So Cambridge is on the eastern shore of Maryland, about 2 hours away, just to familiarize geography. So he was set to stand trial in Bel Air, and weirdly, just before the trial, a bomb was accidentally set off by two Black nationalist supporters at the intersection of US 1 Business and Tollgate Road, which killed the two supporters, completely destroyed their car, and caused severe damage to the historic Bel Air Turnpike toll house,
Wow.
which had to be raised afterwards.
Mm.
And it's such a bizarre, weird coincidence that happened there, that
It took out the toll house.
it took out the toll house. The explosion took out the toll house.
Yeah.
And ultimately, after that happened, the trial was then moved to Howard County, due to fear of, protests and riots. And as it turned out, Brown had been grazed by a bullet earlier in the day in Cambridge in 1967, so he was not present when the fires and riots broke out, so the state prosecutor dismissed the charges.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of the story of that.
Other former alignments that we can touch on real quick. We will go into some of these in more detail. Former State Highway 461, Lake Fanny Road, south of downtown Bel Air. Forge Hill Road, which was former MD Route 590. The bridges here are interesting. The Lake Fanny Road Bridge was built in 1913. Nice little concrete arch bridge that's now on a cul-de-sac road, but it was 100 years ago, not quite. Part of the main road through the area.
Yeah, part of US 1.
Yeah. The bridge over Deer Creek on what was Maryland Route 590 was built in 1911. It was significantly rehabbed about 25 years ago now, we're right around the year 2000. This is another classic early 20th century example of reinforced concrete engineering. It's a very, very interesting historic structure in its own right.
Yeah, and both of these bridges were built right after the State Roads Commission took on US 1.
Other old alignments, we talked about what was Old Route 162, the western approach to the village of Conowingo before that was bypassed when the dam was completed in 1928. Old Forge Hill Road and Arena Road are also sections of Old US 1 that we'll point out over the course of the virtual drive coming up.
So, moving on.
So that's the US 1 side of the ledger. Now let's deal with Route 40.
Yes, Route 40. So, Route 40 is about 19 miles in length, connects the county's two largest cities, Aberdeen and Havre de Grace, with Greater Baltimore. It parallels the Amtrak CSX MARC corridor, which historically were the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad. Pulaski Highway was built between 1935 and 1940. It was named for American Revolutionary War foreign military volunteer of Polish cavalry officer Kazimierz Pulaski.
Yeah, his name is on a lot of stuff in the Northeast.
It is.
Yeah, not just here in Northeast Maryland, yeah.
Yeah, so Pulaski Highway bypassed the old Philadelphia Road, Maryland 7, and as well as Maryland 7A, in the Havre de Grace street grid. US 40 crosses the Susquehanna today and has since 1940 at the Haddam Bridge, and Route 40 served as a primary cross-country route until it was replaced by Interstate 95 in 1963.
So again, some of the highlights on the current alignment. It enters Harford County at Little Gunpowder Falls, just like US 1 does. Passing through areas, Joppatown, Edgewood, Belcamp, it more or less runs through central Aberdeen.
Right.
Right? And then the Aberdeen Proving Ground is nearby. It does not anymore run through downtown Havre de Grace, but there is a pretty significant National Historic District there that we'll talk about in a little more detail coming up.
Yes, and it does go through the city of Havre de Grace.
It does go through the city limit, just not the downtown
Correct.
district of it. Yep.
Correct.
Here are some pictures of Route 40. 40 is different from US 1 in that it was always since the construction of Pulaski Highway, it has basically been a divided highway of 4 lanes or wider, which is different from US 1, which has retained a lot of its rural 2-lane road configuration over the years.
Yes.
So you might say that the Route 40 corridor looks much more suburban in feel than than most parts of Route 1 does.
Oh yeah, and in fact, as we do the virtual drive on 40, you'll see architecturally, most of what you'll see is from the 20th and 21st centuries.
Mm-hmm.
For that reason, because of it being built on an entirely new alignment.
So the very predecessor alignment for Route 40 goes all the way back to colonial times in the late 1600s with the Post Road, which we talked about earlier, which was a pretty significant highway in colonial times, also a very historic one because of the location of the original county seat of Harford County along it. The Baltimore and Havre de Grace turnpike after the Revolution, and then over the years the Philadelphia Road came into being, and then ultimately that was replaced in the 20th century by the Pulaski Highway that we know today.
That's right. And then, again, here's a list of all of the sections of road, because the old alignment is not all one road. It's basically, it's broken up into several different state routes, as well as sections that are now under county maintenance.
Yeah, as with US 1, it's tricky to follow the old alignment of US 40 unless you know ahead of time what you're looking for.
Right.
I guess it's a little easier because Maryland Highway 7 is relatively prominently signed still, even today.
Yeah.
But still, there are gaps in it that you would have a hard time picking up if you didn't know where exactly the road went at that point. Ferries and bridges. This sounds like a topic I would be interested in.
Yay.
There's been a ferry across the Susquehanna River in this area going back to again, colonial times, late 1600s. There was not a fixed link across the Susquehanna until the 20th century, at least in this location, down at Havre de Grace.
Correct. Now, there used to be, for a little bit further north in Lapidum, which is now part of Susquehanna State Park, that connected from Lapidum to Port Deposit on the Cecil County side.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as there being an actual bridge, there wasn't one. In fact, what's really interesting is, so when Frederick Douglass escaped to freedom, he took the train to Havre de Grace. He crossed on the lower Susquehanna Ferry.
He didn't take Delta Airlines?
He did not.
Oh, okay. That's news to me. Go ahead.
Delta Airlines was not around in...
I guess you're right about that. Okay. Yeah. All right. That's fair.
Yes. So then, he crossed at the lower Susquehanna Ferry, took the train to Wilmington, and then took a steamboat to Philadelphia.
Yeah, you wouldn't have hopped on the New Jersey Turnpike at that point.
No.
Okay.
Definitely not. But yeah, so the original bridge was part of the B&O Railroad and was converted into the Susquehanna River Bridge. It was converted to a double-decker bridge that opened in November of 1927. Wait, did we talk about... Let's go back a slide. Yeah, so I didn't talk about... So we talked about how the first bridge, the private toll bridge, was 1910, converted from the B&O Railroad Bridge. But then it was taken over by the State Roads Commission in 1923, which then they added the double deck.
So then once the state got involved, they made some pretty significant improvements to the bridge that was already there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was still very low clearance, very narrow, tight, and so replaced just 13 years later by the much more modern Hayden Bridge.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, here it is. The Hayden Bridge is an interesting structure. So it crosses the Susquehanna at one of its widest points, and it kind of has two different sections to it that cross each channel in the river, because there's an island right in the middle of the river at this point.
Correct, and that's Garrett Island. And that that's part of Cecil County. That has its own interesting history.
Mm-hmm.
But it's now part of the Susquehanna National Refuge.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Really interesting structure that has not really changed much since it opened in 1940. It was built as part of the Pulaski Highway project across northeastern Maryland, so it basically has the same dimensions as the highway on land. It's a 4-lane bridge, which was pretty standard for the day. It doesn't have shoulders, though. That's probably the one thing that, if that bridge were to be built today, that's one thing that they would add to it.
Yes, and it actually wasn't until 2016 that you were allowed to ride a bike over the bridge.
Mm-hmm. I still wouldn't want to do it myself, but...
Yeah.
Something else I want to mention real quick is that this was a toll bridge. I mean, it still is a toll bridge, but it went to all electronic toll collection in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. The state of Maryland and the Maryland Transportation Authority suspended cash toll collection in March 2020 at the onset of the pandemic. They were in the process of doing some early studies into eliminating cash collection altogether and going with an electronic system anyway during this time. So instead of reinstating cash collection, they simply made what was then a temporary fix permanent.
Yeah.
And they gradually put up the gantries that you see today, and the toll booth that was there going back, I don't know how many years, was removed as a result of that.
Yeah, so this bridge is well known, especially in the Northeast, amongst road geeks as well as non-road geeks alike.
Are you going to talk about the Hayden Bridge Pass?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I
know.
So the Hayden Bridge actually has a special pass. The prior to about 2012 or so, it was an actual decal that you would buy and put on your car, that you would pay a flat rate for the year. The idea was so that people going between Harford and Cecil counties would not be economically burdened by paying to cross, especially, people in Havre de Grace and Perryville. And but interestingly, about 10, 11 years ago, it shifted to being entirely Easy Pass, which has created a new problem in the area, in that now that a lot of people know about this Shunpike, that, you can, even if you don't live in the area, because it's not, as of now, it's not geographically limited. You don't have to live in Harford or Cecil County to get it.
Oh.
You can actually purchase an Easy Pass that is just for this bridge.
Wow.
Yes. I think for the flat rate of $20 a year. And
which pays for itself in just 3 crossings or something like that?
Yeah, 4 crossings.
4 crossings, yeah.
So it's definitely, yes. It's
it's a little bit of a loophole in the rule that people have become aware of and are currently exploiting, and who knows if MDTA is in the process of trying to close it or not. But
yeah, so it's come up as in planning meetings because it's created a huge problem at the intersection of US 40 with Maryland 155 because of all the people getting off at 95, getting on Maryland 155, making the left. It's a very peculiar intersection. It's like a 6-point intersection.
Yeah.
And so, and then making the left. So Maryland 155 backs up significantly, and to do the Shunpike.
Yeah.
So.
And then making a left onto
Maryland 222.
222. Yeah, that backs up a lot now too. Yeah.
Yes. My solution would be to geographically limit it. That you need to live in Harford or Cecil.
You have to have an account, or you have to have a permanent address in those 2 counties or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be one way to deal with it, I suppose.
Yeah. So, Havre de Grace is an amazing architectural delight. And again, having to pick just a few sites to highlight on the slide.
I do like your first one, though.
Yes, the first one. I have the old railroad bridge juxtaposed against the current Amtrak bridge. And you can actually see the piers for the old bridge in the photo of the current bridge. That's at David Craig Park. Unfortunately, I've gotten word that those piers are going to be demolished starting this summer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go and get a photo of them, come to the May 6th meet, or
come to our meet in 2 weeks.
Come to our meet in 2 weeks, or get down there ASAP, because they're going to go soon as part of the new Amtrak bridge construction project.
Yeah, it's part of the early works, in quotes, for the replacement of the Susquehanna River Bridge, which carries, as we mentioned, Amtrak and MARC trains. It does not carry CSX trains, because those trains cross on the other Susquehanna River Bridge, which is on the upstream side of the Hayden Bridge. This bridge, the Amtrak bridge, crosses on the downstream side of it.
Yes.
So it's important to differentiate in this case, because there are two different railroad bridges, and they're both active, but they carry different railroads.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Amtrak bridge project is a planned replacement of the existing Amtrak bridge, which has been around since about 1906. I want to say something like that.
Yes.
It's very, very out of date. It's been they've needed to do something about this bridge for a lot of years. So it remains to be seen if funding will be made available for the full replacement, but they are doing some early works to get ready for that project in the form of removing the original bridge piers that go back well over 100 years.
Yes. So, next site I chose is the Abraham Jarrett Thomas House, which in the then photo is the Lafayette Hotel and Restaurant, and then in the now photo is the current American Legion Post. Basically, it's as you can see the Amtrak bridge in the background, right? So it's right there at the crossing. It's on the site and perhaps even the foundations of the original ferry house. And it was an inn run in conjunction with the old hand-operated ferry boats. The next building I highlighted here is the Spencer Silver Mansion, which is one of the finest Victorian mansions in Havre de Grace, and is stone exterior, and you can actually stay there. It's a bed and breakfast. And then, in a nice juxtaposition,
an equally beautiful building.
Yes, I think it's very equally beautiful. Thank you very much. If you're a fan of mid-century modern architecture like I am, this is the Medical Arts Building, which was built in 1960. It was designed by Poldy Hirsch, who was the first woman corporate member of the Baltimore chapter of the American Institute of Architects. She was featured as an early woman of architecture in Maryland, and her family immigrated from Switzerland, settled in Havre de Grace. This was her first building that she designed. It was her husband's and then later her daughter's doctor's offices. And I just think those are again four of the many beautiful sites in Havre de Grace.
Yeah, if you say so. Anyway.
Hey! Hey! Comment in the chat if you also like mid-century modern architecture.
All right.
In addition to beautiful Victorian.
Well, the Victorian building is gorgeous. I agree with that.
I love it all. So let's talk about some architectural highlights on Pulaski Highway. So what I've highlighted here, I've highlighted 2 different restaurants and a motel, and why these are important. So the New Ideal Diner was in Aberdeen. As of 2021 was being used as a seafood restaurant. The middle one is the Sportsman Grill. Also on Route 40 near Aberdeen is currently Ray's Caribbean American restaurant. And the Lakeside Motel, that is near the intersection of Maryland 152. So near Joppa Magnolia area, and auto-oriented classic motel. It's currently being used as a rehab facility, and unfortunately I've gotten word that it's going to be demolished. So again, come check it out sooner rather than later. But why I highlighted these particular buildings is because during the early 1960s, and you can flip
which
through
kind of segues into
this
slide,
yeah. Right? So during the early 1960s, there was a huge issue on Pulaski Highway, where African diplomats who were traveling to and from D.C. were being denied restaurant service. And this made international news because they complained to President Kennedy, and it was embarrassing for the country that that this was happening. And so, basically, I'm going to pull out my notes again on this, right? So, basically, in 1961, there were freedom riders that were organized to end the racial segregation and exclusion in restaurants and motels. So, of the ones that so, I'll get back to the ones I showed. But basically, the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, and others tried to negotiate with a lot of these establishments to drop segregation. And a lot of them at first promised that, oh yeah, we'll desegregate, and, oh, don't, come do protests, we'll desegregate. And then it turned out, no, they didn't desegregate. So, on December 16th, 1961, anywhere from 500 to 700 freedom riders protested all along Route 40 in Harford County with restaurant sit-ins to end racial segregation. And these incidents directly led to the passage of Maryland's Public Accommodations Law, which was passed bearing racial discrimination in restaurants and motels in 1963. So just before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Maryland was the only state south of the Mason-Dixon to have any sort of legislation.
Any sort of desegregation law on the books prior to the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to these three, by the time of the Freedom Rider protests, the New Ideal Diner and the Lakeside Motel were desegregated, but the Sportsman Grill was not. And it's very interesting that, ironically, the Sportsman Grill is the only one that's still is the only one of the three that I've pictured that is being used as a restaurant, and a Caribbean American one to boot. And so, and there's several other examples of different motels and restaurants all along the corridor. But what's kind of interesting, right? So this happened.
I want to ask you a quick question. Is the Freedom Ride of 1961 related to the broader Freedom Rides movement that was going on in the early 60s in like Tennessee and Alabama down that way?
Yes, it was.
It was all like a coordinated thing, or?
Yeah, so you had these national organizations that were ultimately kind of at the top, but yes, these were local people that were in Maryland that were protesting them, but there was organizational efforts from like CORE and from other more nationally known civil rights groups.
Okay. Which I think segues us into this topic briefly.
It does.
You have an interesting take on this that I haven't heard before, but I want you to explain it.
Yeah, so actually I have to give Mike the credit for the take on this. So, and in fact, he already sort of beat me to it. So here's the reality is, the Northeast Expressway was opened in November of 1963. One of John F. Kennedy Jr.'s last public appearances, unfortunately, before he was assassinated, which is why the highway is named after him.
Yeah, I think the renaming happened weeks after.
Yeah.
So it was only known as the Northeast Expressway for a few weeks.
Yeah.
After it opened.
Yeah.
Of course, it was known when it was a dotted line on a map as the Northeast Expressway, but in operation, it didn't last very long under that name.
Yeah. So I-95 opened. And it's something that Mike first brought to my attention. The reality is that the service plazas along the interstate highways, such as the Maryland House, were integrated from day one. So if you were a person of color and you were traveling, as a white American, it's easy for me to look at like, oh, look at this cute old motel, look at this cute restaurant. But those places were not accommodating. And in 1963, even after integration, it's not a comfortable experience if you're a Black American or another person of color traveling to a lot of places on U.S. highways.
Well, even in a state like Maryland, that was relatively ahead of the curve compared to its southern counterparts.
Yeah.
It was still not a pleasant place to be if you were an African American traveling in a rural part of the state, for instance.
Yeah.
So I think the point here is that the opening of a new superhighway that allowed travelers to bypass the small towns, coupled with the fact that because I-95 was built with federal dollars and these travel plazas were built as part of the project, there are two travel plazas along 95 in northeastern Maryland. There's the Maryland House and there's the Chesapeake House on the other side of the Susquehanna River over in Cecil County. But both of those plazas were desegregated and integrated from day one. So they were relatively ahead of the curve even from, the local establishments and along, say, Route 1 or Route 40,
Yeah.
for instance.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to look at it from that perspective that, the interstate, when the interstate came along, it provided kind of a safe corridor
Yeah.
for African Americans that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And I think that that's an interesting part of the equation that doesn't get talked about very much.
I agree. All right, so this is that same 1969 Harford County Planning and Zoning map that I showed you all earlier when I pointed out the Pairing Freeway, but now I'm zooming in on US 40 and have that highlighted because I want to point out something very interesting. US 40 has stayed pretty much the same, but a lot of the connections to other state highways were planned to be very different from what happened on the ground. And I'll, point these out as we're going through the virtual drive, but it's very interesting. If we start again, southwest corner, Maryland 152 was actually intended to be, it was intended to be a highway, to that, not just went up the existing Maryland 152 corridor, but also continued north to where Maryland 23 and Maryland 439, Old York Road, are, to 83. And it's very interesting because this was planned out, and of course the East-West Expressway was planned too, these were planned as bypasses, ways to bypass Baltimore for truck traffic. Mm-hmm. And ultimately those weren't built. And I grew up in Jarrettsville, and still have family there, and as anybody who lives or has been in that part of the world knows, there's a lot of truck traffic on these two-lane roads.
I did notice a higher amount of truck traffic on Route 23 through Jarrettsville, for instance, than what I would have expected to see.
Yes.
But
yes.
I did find that interesting, yeah.
Yeah, a big part of that is because, these highways weren't built. Maryland 24 was built, but it was not built as a full interchange with 40. And a big part of that is because of environmental concerns. So that was built as more jug handle instead. Now, interestingly, if we continue northeast, we come upon Perryman. And Perryman this has huge implications for Perryman. So basically, as you see, Maryland 543 was supposed to continue past Route 40 into Perryman. And then north of Perryman, you see that Maryland 715 Short Road, which is sort of the northern limits of Perryman, but also an entry to Aberdeen Proving Ground, was planned to continue west and then north to have a direct connection with the East-West Expressway as well as 95. Why this is really important is that neither of these connections were built, but yet Perryman was zoned for heavy industrial. Mm-hmm. And so right now it's a huge development concern because a very large legacy farm has sold a lot of land to mega warehouses in Perryman, but there's no transportation infrastructure to handle it. And the county council and county executive literally just passed a moratorium, a 90-day moratorium to evaluate the situation because it's a big problem when you don't build the roads, but you keep the industrial zoning.
Yeah, wow.
And also, Perryman had a very different industrial Perryman in the past was known for canning and the canning industry.
Hmm.
And again, this was, fueled by Route 40 being there, the railroads being there. Very different from the mega warehouses and giant Amazon type warehouses of today.
Yeah, they just built one of those things in Fishkill.
Did they really?
Not long ago, yeah.
Oh, geez.
Believe it or not.
Wow. We've got some near here too.
Yeah.
But anyway, so those are just very interesting to note. The connections in Aberdeen and Havre de Grace are pretty much the same, but just kind of wanted to point out that while 40 has stayed the same, some of these other route connections have not.
Speaking of 40 maybe staying the same or not at the same time.
Yes. So, as we mentioned, we've kind of gone from Route 40 being cross-country highway to 95 replacing the cross-country function, but still being very heavily trafficked highway locally. Well, that traffic is not just motor vehicles. The traffic also includes bicycle and pedestrians. And so, again, why this is so, the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, in conjunction with Harford County Zoning and Planning, cities of Aberdeen and Havre de Grace, are looking at and creating a concept plan for bicycle and pedestrian improvements along US 40. Looking at a shared use plan. They've got a couple different options. They're in the final concept stage. Unfortunately, there's no funding yet for implementation, but this acknowledges the need for multimodal facilities on this local highway. So unfortunately, a lot of times people think that, oh, there's a large shoulder, so people will be fine, but they're not. And there have been a tragic number of deaths from people walking and biking on US 40 because, public transportation is very bare bones in Harford County. So if you live in Havre de Grace and work in Aberdeen, or vice versa, you might have to get there on your 2 legs or 2 wheels.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mentioned before how nerve-wracking it is, if you had to ride a bike over the Hayden Bridge. I mean, it's kind of the same deal here.
It is. And in fact, you'll notice that in the plan, it stops just before the Hayden Bridge because that has to be its own completely separate study.
Yeah, because then you're dealing with structurally altering the bridge at that point if you're going to put a regulation with pathway on there. So
yeah,
who knows if that'll ever see the light of day? But so that's kind of what's cooking right now between Aberdeen and Havre de Grace.
Yeah. So
that's all we got PowerPoint wise.
Yes.
So we'd be happy to take questions. We will jump into the video momentarily, but anybody who would like us to expand on anything, answer anything, feel free to leave something in the chat for us. We'll do the best we can. Well, we'll do the best we can, and then Mike will do the best he can to answer also.
Yes. Yes. So I'm working my way backwards here, but yes, Maryland House and Chesapeake House were both remodeled in recent years, which were basically full teardowns. So the original structures are no longer there. They're on the same site.
The original Maryland House was a neat structure.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Old. It was a replica, but it was kind of like that old style, like 19th century or maybe even earlier than that.
Yes.
Architecture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it had and when it first opened, it had a full service restaurant.
Yes, it did.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Which is very different from today's, fast food, grab and go.
Yeah. Yep.
Culture. Let's see. All right, Doug. Let's see. Doug Kerr shared his favorite road-related point of interest in Harford County.
I have a feeling I know what that's going to be.
Ooh, the suspense is killing me. The Jericho Covered Bridge! Yes!
What a shock.
What a shock! Spoiler alert, while not featured in this presentation, it is part of the Meat Tour in 2 weeks.
Yeah, we will be passing through there.
We will. It is the only remaining bridge, covered bridge in Harford County. It crosses Harford County, Baltimore County line. Also the only one in Baltimore County.
Yep.
Yep. Let's see.
Do you want to do 1 first or 40 first?
Ooh, let's do 1 first.
I agree.
Yeah. Oh, good point, Trainer Red Mario. What a great year to open in 1940 for US 40. I have no idea why I didn't think of that.
Well, we had good timing then, right?
We did. And yes, Havre de Grace and Aberdeen actually do now touch.
You mean like the corporate limits?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm scrolling through. I'm not seeing any questions.
Well, that's okay.
Which
If
is fine.
If some
yeah.
come up during the video, we can take some time to.
Yes, if you've asked a question earlier on and I've missed it or Mike has missed it, please retype it in the chat. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, whatever. You know, however you wanna do it.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's video time. What do you say?
It's video time.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're starting on US 1. We're going to drive US 1 north through Harford County.
Yes, we're starting here in Kingsville, so we've not yet crossed into Harford yet, but we'll let you know when we do.
Yep. We're still in Baltimore County at this point.
Ooh, so fun fact. Up here on the right, and I'll point out exactly when we get to it, there's this old boundary stone that basically says on it, anyone who dare moves it will be cursed. And it's really funny because the road is practically smack up against it. And yeah, I don't think I'd want to move it either. It's right up here. So you'll see where this sort of shopping center sign is. You really can't see it that well from the road. The Kingsville Professional Center. It's right on the other side of this guardrail.
Oh, okay. Kind of hiding back there, yeah.
Yeah.
Just your standard, nondescript 4-lane, not divided. There's no obviously there's no median barrier here, but it's got your kind of typical suburban feel to it, at least in this area.
Yes, and Mike did point out earlier in the chat, which is correct, that Route 1 was actually the first one to be 3-lane highway. So it was first expanded with the center lane.
Okay.
And then now it's 4-lane.
Okay.
All right, so now we're approaching the Little Gunpowder Falls, which is the boundary line.
Yep.
And this is Gunpowder Falls State Park. Absolutely beautiful area to hike in. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a pretty expansive green space, isn't it?
It is. I don't know the exact mileage, but it runs very long up the falls.
Okay. Now we're in Harford County officially.
Woo!
Hooray!
Hooray!
I think I had been on this road once before this, when I filmed this, because the video we're going to watch is from February of 2023. I think I had to come up this way once because for some reason there was like a crash on 95 or something like that, and so I hadn't been on this stretch before, so I thought, well, I'll add some mileage of US 1 that I don't already have. So that was the only time prior to this filming that I had been on this stretch.
Cool. We just passed Log Cabin Candies. Some of the best chocolate in the world. Just throwing that out there. This whole area is kind of known as Falston. The historic town of Falston is a little bit north of here. But according to the 2010 census, the population was about 9,000 people. It's considered a semi-rural community, consisting mostly of farms and suburban-like developments. So we're now approaching the intersection with Maryland 152.
Yeah, as we enter more developed area south of Bel Air.
Much more developed. Now, there actually is, there was a master plan done for this area about a decade ago.
Mm.
And unfortunately, as sometimes goes with master plans, they don't, they're really great vision exercises, but don't kind of pan out the way that...
Well, that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was really great. You look through the master plan and it's like, whoa, we want to have more like neighborhoods and more community like centering, like walkability, and this does not scream walkability to me.
Oh, yeah, funny, I don't get that impression about this area either. Yeah.
No. So interestingly, we're coming up on this blinking light. It's a very interesting sign, right? It says Milton Avenue, left, hospital straight ahead. The reason why the sign is like that is because the hospital used to be to the left. It's where the old Fallston General Hospital was prior to Upper Chesapeake being built about 25 years ago.
Mm. We also passed a Waffle House, too. I'll just point that out.
Waffle House.
It might be the most important part of the whole drive.
Yep.
I could go for a good bowl of grits right now myself.
Oh man, I love Waffle House. Unfortunately, I can't eat gluten or dairy.
Yeah.
The cross-contamination just wrecks my stomach.
Yeah. Well, where you went to college, there was plenty of Waffle Houses around, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, down in old Virginia.
In Lynchburg, Virginia, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now, what we're coming upon what was originally the rural village of Benson, which is now more locally known as Jones Junction, because as you'll start to see, once we get past this traffic light, you will see Jones dealerships for pretty much every make and model of car in existence. And so basically, it was from about 1973 onward is when the Jones Motor Company moved to Benson and started expanding here. And basically, they, this is a very interesting quote I'm going to read from the Jones Junction history portion of the website. Driving past the intersection of Harford Road and Bel Air Road one day, Vernon turned to his son, Danny, and said, "Can't you see the entire hill covered with cars?" That simple statement became the vision for taking over that entire section of land and covering it with cars. The Jones family purchased the last piece of property making this happen in 2014, shortly before Vernon passed away. It was a dream come true for him to see this happen, and is what makes Jones Junction the incredible family of franchises it is today. So now we're getting on to the Bel Air bypass, and as you can see, this is one of the portions that was actually built to freeway standards.
Mm-hmm.
One of the only portions.
Pretty much.
Pretty much, yep. 4-lane divided.
This is basically where it would have tied in with the section that would have continued to the southwest, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is a 2-lane road and it's a pretty high-speed road, you saw that sign back there that was mandatory headlight use, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So, as you're starting to see, now the roadway is going to merge down to 2 lanes. Now, interestingly, if we were to continue straight, the state owns all that right-of-way. So they could, at any given point, they could build a second bridge at Winter's Run and continue the highway.
Yeah, and we'll see as we go through here that there are overpasses built over the bypass that kind of have an extra span to the side. That's where the other roadway would be built in the future. So they built the overpasses with the expansion of the highway in mind in future years, which is a pretty smart thing to do.
Yeah. Yep, and interestingly, so here's the interchange of 24. If you really can't tell from the video, but there's actually like a ghost ramp that kind of, if you go off the exit and then look to the left, there's a little ghost ramp there. And there's also one on the other side if you're going from 24 north.
For
where they had planned that if the highway ever hooked in. was ever expanded and the interchange expanded.
I see. Okay. Yeah, this is that intersection that we were showing you renderings of the interchange of, several slides ago.
Yes.
With those little, what do you call it? Those goofy little renderings of the interchange and all the stuff they were looking to do there. Yeah, that's this area here.
Temporarily, we go back to, 4 lanes and then, nope.
Yeah, I mean, at least they give you merge lanes and exit lanes here, which you don't always get on a 2-lane freeway.
So, weird. So, this is probably I have the weirdest connection to this guardrail that anyone can ever have to a guardrail, probably ever. So, as you can see, there's this extra thick guardrail that is dividing what is about to become a 4-lane undivided highway. The problem is there were a lot of fatal head-on collisions here.
Yeah.
There was one in particular that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And it was very tragic of a family where half the family passed away in a head-on collision. And the mom and the son passed away. And interestingly enough, in the years after they passed away, they did a benefit 5K down at Marshy Point Nature Center in Baltimore County, which, interestingly, some of the land from that was my grandparents' land.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it's such a bizarre connection. But now we're going over 92424. You can see the lane ending. There's exit only.
Yeah, so 24 leaves and continues to the north towards the Pennsylvania border. And we mentioned Route 924 briefly, but that's the old alignment of Route 24 prior to the 1987 relocation to the divided highway alignment that it occupies today.
Yeah. Now we're back to the Super 2. Now, interestingly, before the Hickory bypass was built, what used to happen is that to the left here, the only way that you could get on to the bypass was from 23. It curved around and became the southbound lane. And see how now we come at an angle and there's all these trees to our right? It used to come to an end at a T intersection with Business 1.
Yep.
But now we're crossing through Business 1. We're coming up on 23 Junction, the East-West Highway.
Yup.
So we're at the eastern terminus of the East-West Highway and Maryland 23, which, if things had turned out differently, you would have seen a sign saying right to Aberdeen.
Yeah.
Left would have gone not just to Jarrettsville, but potentially all the way to Hagerstown.
Yeah, left to York.
Yeah.
Or something like that, yeah.
Left to a lot of other places.
Now, there were discussions around that time about building an outer loop around Greater Baltimore, right?
That would have been part of it.
It would have been part of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because one beltway isn't enough.
No, it's not. Coming up on Maryland 543.
This is now the Hickory bypass section.
Yes.
Right?
We crossed into the Hickory bypass section once we crossed Business Route 1.
Yeah, okay.
And now now just as quickly, Hickory bypass is about to come to an end.
Yeah, this is just kind of like a divided highway bypass of a few traffic lights on the old alignment.
Yeah. You can see on the left, here's where Business 1 is coming in. And you'll notice that the mile markers, and I think someone pointed this out in the chat, that you saw the highest mile marker there was mile 8.3. That yes, the bypass has its own mile marker system.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yes.
You see this sometimes on like bypass bannered highways.
Yeah.
That are just like a different state highway, but in this case, it's not a bannered bypass route. It's just the same route. So it's interesting that they used a different mile marker convention on an existing road.
Yes. Now we're in the section that would have been on the same alignment if this had been upgraded to a freeway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you see that now that we're on the other side of Bel Air, it gets a lot quieter, much more rural in nature. Much of northeastern and northern Harford County looks a lot like this. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Goes very quickly from suburbia to, countryside.
And that's partially on purpose. Harford County has what they call the development envelope, which they established in 1977, where basically in order to that there's areas that are much significantly harder to develop than others, to try and keep it more rural. Fun fact up here is, interestingly, you'll see this school sign, right? It's for the Bridges Montessori School, but the house right next to it, which I don't think you could really see too well because of the trees, was an old schoolhouse. And has been converted into a house.
Okay.
So, just another fun random history fact.
Because we haven't had enough of those tonight so far.
No, not at all. To the left here, this cool building with the little corners on the roof, that used to be a service station back in the day. Auto-oriented development.
Like back when you were younger? Or?
No, I'm talking like,
going way back.
Going way back.
Okay.
We're now coming up to Forge Hill Road. So the old Maryland 590 is coming up on our right.
Yep. So an old alignment of US 1 just went off to the right there.
And this was built in the 1930s. So again, that same period where they were like, oh, maybe we should build the main roads to have more capacity. Instead of just focusing on the rural roads. Imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of those sections.
Yeah.
On the left, we just passed what used to be Wilson's Farm Market. It used to be a very well-known rural market. Now we're going down the hill towards Deer Creek.
Deer Creek and the, what's the name of that state park?
I'm so glad you asked. So, I have a story for you. So to our right is actually what's called Palmer State Park. Although, I will have everybody on this recording know that not all of the land was owned by the Palmer family. Some of it was owned by the Stifler family. They were under the impression when they sold it to the Harford Land Trust that it would be that section would be called Stifler State Park, and it was not. It was all called Palmer State Park. And so the descendants are understandably bitter. And as somebody who, as I mentioned earlier, talks about how, part of my family's farm was, now part of Marshy Point Nature Center, I can understand, how it kind of sucks when, your family doesn't get mentioned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So at the bottom of that valley there, we crossed over Deer Creek. And,
Oh, that was a great question. So Mark Moore asked in the chat if it was Jim Palmer State Park.
I don't think it's that Palmer.
No,
right?
I don't think so. Although, I mean, it's a small world, so who knows? They could be related, but to my knowledge, I don't think Jim Palmer is related. But yes, that is a fun thing about living in Harford County and coming from a large family is the fun surprises when I find distant relatives that I didn't know I had. It's actually really cool. I've had it happen on both sides of my family. In fact, one of my ancestors signed the Bush Declaration that I referenced earlier. His name was Benjamin Bradford Norris.
Okay.
So my mom's side of the family has been here at least that long. My dad's side of the family is later, but cool story. The current mayor of the town of Bel Air, Kevin Bianca, is my third cousin.
Okay.
Now we're coming up on Dublin, and you'll see on the right, we're coming up on the Jocelyn Gorsuch house.
Yeah, I didn't notice that when I was
There it
going
is.
through. Probably because it just looked like a normal house that had been there all along.
Yeah.
But no, that's a relocation.
And this used to be Glen Echo Furniture, and that is now the Harford County Agricultural Offices, as well as the University of Maryland Extension Offices there. To the right, new Darlington, Dublin Darlington branch of the Harford County Public Library. Was a first-generation Wawa, then became a bank, and is now a branch of the library. This area is kind of known as Dublin, although the historic part of Dublin is just a little bit north of here. So, also, this area was known as Poplar Grove. There's an old alignment of 136 called Poplar Grove Road just south of here. And then we're coming up on Arena Road, which is another old alignment, and led to the little map dot of Poole.
Okay.
That was bypassed. Okay, got a question about, was it just a park? So, I don't know if that was in relation to the Jocelyn Gorsuch house or not, but yes, there is a park there. That land is owned by Harford County. There's playground, pavilions. There's potential of further equestrian activities, and even talk of that the Harford County Farm Fair might be expanded there. So definitely meant to be like an agricultural hub.
I'm seeing comments in the chat about the Wawa Royal Farms rivalry. Do we want to go down that rabbit hole? Or?
Oh, I know, right? Of all the things I could say on this channel, that might be one of the most controversial, right?
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's like, whose side are you on? That's a dangerous...
We joke in Harford County that when you're born in Harford County, you are sorted into one of four houses, like Harry Potter, Hogwarts. Except instead of the four houses being Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin, it's Royal Farms, Wawa, Sheets, or Highs. Highs is it's like a localish chain that also has gas stations. Nowhere near as big as the others.
Okay.
But
yeah, I've heard of the other three, but not...
Yeah, Highs is probably like the Hufflepuff. Everybody forgets about them.
Oh.
I know. Poor Highs. Coming up on the intersection with Maryland Route 440. See, it's a hard choice. Back when I could eat gluten, I was all about the ROFO, the Royal Farms, because they have the best fried chicken and the best Western fries.
Do they?
Yes, but I can't eat either one of those now. So I think maybe part of me stays away and has shifted to my Wawa loyalty because it's like less painful.
Yeah, I guess.
And also I prefer Wawa's coffee. I don't really currently live near Highs, and I love Sheets, but the Sheets is a little far. I'll go out of my way for the Sheets if I'm close to it, but Wawa's probably my number one. I grew up with Highs. We still have Highs in Jarrettsville.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes. All right, so we're coming up on, we just passed Smith Road and Berkeley Road. All this excitement, I didn't point it out, right? So Smith Road was where Route 1 turned off to go to the original crossing.
Okay.
Of the Susquehanna River. Also, Berkeley is a really cool area. The Berkeley Crossroads Historic District is a small rural crossroads community that dates from the late 18th century through the early 20th century. but it was also a very important 19th century free black community. There was a station on the Underground Railroad there. And the Hosanna School is a really great museum and was one of the first freedmen schools in the area that opened after the Civil War. 623 Castleton Road. If we were to go to the right, that takes us to historic Darlington, which settlement began as early as the 1700s, was boosted by the Susquehanna and Tidewater Canal, which, spoiler alert, is another stop on the in-person tour that we're not going to get to see today. Castleton Road, what's very interesting is that name may have been derived from, so Berkeley Crossroads, right, was right near where a lot of the early colonialists called one of the Susquehannocks castle towns, one of their settlements.
You said the name of that canal was
the Susquehanna and Tidewater.
Susquehanna and Tidewater.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, because I've known about that lock house for a lot of years, but I always forget the name of the canal that it was built for.
Yeah.
Coming up on the Conowingo Dam here in just a moment. So before we move on to Route 40 and all the other excitement, we hit on everything we had to. I think
so. There used to be, if we were to go to the right, there used to be a company, Conowingo Village, that was created for the initial workers at the Conowingo hydroelectric plant.
Oh, okay. Here's the dam itself. This road has probably not changed at all in almost 100 years. Probably the same dimensions as it's always been. It's a narrow trip through here.
Yes.
There was a question earlier about, like, had they built the Pairing Freeway, what the bridge here would have had to look like. And given the fact that Conowingo Lake is about 100 feet deep, and then the foundation or the bedrock beneath it is even deeper than that, you probably would have a bridge where you would want as few piers in the river as possible, so you would have to do something. I'm not even sure that they would want to build something along the lines of the Tidings Bridge, for instance. You might have to have something with much longer spans to it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting what if that, as we said, never got to see the light of day, but I like these unbuilt bridge hypothetical questions, you know?
Me too.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
Yes.
As we reach the other end of the dam, we enter Cecil County. At the traffic light that we just went through is Maryland Route 222, which once upon a time was a southern continuation of U.S. Route 222, which continued south along the east bank of the Susquehanna River down through Port Deposit, and it ended at US 40 in Perryville. The existing U.S. highway got truncated, and it now begins up ahead at US 1 instead of US 40.
Yeah.
But that wraps up US 1. Any closing thoughts out of you, or?
No.
Yeah, I think we did a good job with that.
Yeah. Oh, Mike pointed out Shursville Road was the former Maryland 160.
Was that before the dam, or?
No, it was actually on that map that he created that was from the 1940s.
Oh, okay. Okay. This is where the existing US 222 begins, just up the road here. Yeah, there was a brief concurrency here between 1 and 222 before the US 222 was shortened.
Oh, wait, do we want to... I think we should go through all of the Route 1 stuff before we do 40.
Do you want to do that
Yeah,
first?
I think
all right,
so.
So, well, I'll show you... We'll show you the old bridges first. We'll show you Old Lake Fanny Road. which is a bridge built in 1913. And again, this is an old alignment of US 1. It's now technically an old alignment of US 1 business. But yeah, this is a cul-de-sac, and if you didn't know about this bridge, you would never find it. You would never know it was here, but here it is. I was probably one of only like 3 people to drive this road on this day. But yeah, so yeah, it comes to a dead end here.
Yay,
But
going
yeah.
back over.
Historical, it's certainly significant historically. So if you're ever in the area, it's Lake Fanny Road off of US 1 Business south of downtown Bel Air. And then I'll show you. You want to just show them the bridge on Forge Hill Road?
Let's do all of it.
You want to do all of it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so now we're back north of Bel Air on US 1. And we mentioned Forge Hill Road before. That's an old alignment of US 1. It was not an old alignment of... It was not part of US 1 Business, which was further south.
Ooh, okay, question. From Trainer Red Mario. Did Maryland have a plank road like Virginia?
Well,
Ooh.
first we have to define what a plank road is.
Yeah. What is a plank road?
I don't know.
I don't either.
That's a good question.
I've heard that term before, and I'm just drawing a blank as to what exactly it is. But here, I do want to point out while we're here, this is Kalmia Road. To the right. Or are we coming up on it? No, I think it was back there to the right. There was a historic black AME church. So Kalmia was another area that was where a lot of free blacks settled. Slowly making our way down.
Yeah, we're heading back into that same valley that we were in before, across from Palmer State Park. Yeah, so the state highways that were assigned to these old alignments they didn't stick around very long. I think that Forge Hill was given a state highway number in the mid 1930s, but that and also Lake Fanny Road was given a state highway number, and those were both decommissioned in the early 1950s.
Yep, Mike said in the chat, Lake Fanny was dropped in May of 53.
Yeah, which was around the same time that this was dropped also.
Oh, here we come!
Yeah, so this is kind of a blind curve here as you turn left onto the 1911 bridge over Deer Creek. You can kind of see why they were in a hurry to bypass it, because it was only open as the main road for about 20 years before they built what's now the current alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works for stagecoaches, but not for automobiles.
No. And the thing is, and we'll pass it when we'll pass it soon. I mentioned that this was not even the original alignment of this road. There was an old Forge Hill Road, and that road was bypassed when this bridge was built.
You took a different path through the valley or whatever?
It was a little bit west of here.
Yeah.
And yes, it was called that because there was a forge here. And a plank road, apparently, is a road composed of wooden planks or puncheon logs. Apparently there was a plank road boom in the United States that lasted from 1844 to the mid-1850s, largely in the eastern United States and New York.
I guess it's just a way of, quote-unquote, paving the road.
Yes.
It was just overlaid with timber.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you know how Lake Fanny got its name?
Oh, I don't. Mike, do you know? Ooh.
Yeah, I want to know that story.
Well, now I know what I'll be researching next week.
Okay. Yeah, so the old Forge Hill Road was back behind us, wasn't it? Or was
Yes.
it still coming up?
That was behind us.
Where it tied in with regular Forge Hill Road.
Yes, I missed it because I was busy reading about plank roads.
Yeah. But so there are 3 different generations of an alignment through this area.
Yep.
Yeah, and at the north end here, we tie back in with U.S. Route 1. Do you want to show the people Arena Road, or...
Yeah, let's do it.
you
It's
wanna
short.
do it? Yeah, it's not very long. Yeah. Arena Road is further north, but not by much, right? It's
No,
it's
not by
only
much.
like maybe it's another mile up the road,
Yeah.
if that.
Ooh, okay,
yeah.
so Trainer Red Mario says parts of the original Route US 1 was a plank road, I believe. Interesting.
Well, it could have been.
Yeah.
I didn't find anything along those lines during my research of this before the show, but it could have
It
been.
could have been, yeah.
Did you say that there was some sort of crossroads here off of
This is
Arena,
it.
or?
Boom. This is Pool.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah, just kind of just taking out a little windy bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One business.
Yay!
I think for the interest of time, we should just play the part through downtown Bel Air. Because
Okay.
we still have Route 40 to get to.
That's fine. Yes,
so...
we cannot skip the town of Bel Air.
Well, I'll make you happy and play the section through downtown Bel Air. How's that sound?
Yes.
So this is old US 1 before the Bel Air bypass was built. So that would have been mid-60s.
Yes.
When this switchover happened.
You started it at Tollgate Road, so that was where the toll house was.
Mm-hmm. You know, the intersection back there was for Route 24.
Yes.
Hey, I was just here a few hours ago getting coffee.
Yay!
That looks familiar.
It does.
Yeah, very commercial strip through here before we actually get to the old town, quote unquote, the downtown strip.
Yeah, this is all Baltimore Pike.
Is that what they call it?
Yes.
Okay.
Basically, everything north of 24 is Baltimore Pike. Everything south is Bel Air Road. But there are some addresses. There's some inconsistency. There's some addresses south of there that do have Baltimore Pike addresses.
Okay.
But the idea at the time was, we'll call the part in Bel Air Baltimore Pike and the part outside of Bel Air, Bel Air. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, well.
Well, here's the Van Bibber house on our right.
Okay.
There it is in all its glory.
And you see the signs for Maryland 924, so that's what we're joining here as we turn compass northwest.
Yes,
To
now
go through downtown.
we are now on Main Street.
Beautiful Main Street.
Main Street, Bel Air. Like I said, I could tell you about every single building.
Yeah, I know you could. Yeah. This is a very lovely little downtown strip here.
To the left is the courthouse, which you really can't see that well on our virtual tour, which just means you have to come to the meet to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Courthouse Square. This intersection of Pennsylvania Avenue is the differentiating point between North Main Street and South Main Street.
This reminds me of a much bigger version of downtown Fishkill.
Yeah. Cool.
Fishkill's my hometown, by the way, for those of you who don't already know.
Yes. Yes, Dan is actually from New York.
Representing the Hudson Valley region of New York State, yep.
Yes. But travels to and visits Maryland a lot. So.
Yeah, well, you know what? As I like to say, I was in the area.
Yes.
So I thought, you know what? Why not do a presentation with you?
Yes! All right, now we're turning onto Broadway. Now, this area, you'll see a lot of cool historic houses. There's been renewed interest, actually, in creating this as a Broadway historic district. A lot of these houses are currently designated as their own individual historic sites, but there's interest in making this an entire historic district, which is really cool.
How would that happen? Would that have to go through certain levels of government in order to be acknowledged and signed? Or?
So in the town of Bel Air, how it would work is it would have to go through the town's Historic Preservation Commission, who then would make a recommendation to the Board of Town Commissioners, and the mayor is actually also on the Board of Town Commissioners, and basically from there, a resolution would be crafted. Probably I would be the one that would craft the resolution.
Aha!
Aha!
I hereby declare.
Hereby declare this is the historic district.
That's right.
And then the town board would pass it into law. So that's how it works on a local level. Now, obviously, if it were to be on, a county level. So, in at least as far as county level in Maryland goes, I would imagine the process would be similar on the county level. But, state and federal, those would be totally different processes. We're now coming up on the northern limits of the town of Bel Air. Interestingly, this area just north of the traffic light used to be what was called the Delhaven Motel. Another one of those cute auto hotels. There is exactly one cabin left, and hopefully we can see it on the right up here from the motel. And unfortunately, it's in very bad shape, so I don't see that it being long for this world. There it is in the trees on the right.
Well, well, there's still a foundation for the old sign that was there. I guess. Yeah.
And now we're north of the town limits. Oh, yep. No, don't end it yet.
I just want to see how much longer we got.
2 minutes.
Okay, fine.
And then I want to do Hickory.
You want to what?
Do Hickory.
You want to do Hickory also?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you want to skip these 2 minutes.
I mean, I don't know how important the next 2 minutes is, but...
Not particularly.
No.
Might as well do it, though.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're already here, so...
We're already here, yes. For up to me, I would be like, let's watch videos all night.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are going to fast forward through this bus stop.
Oh, yeah. I don't blame you. Although I will point out up here, when we get to it, where the, where the original bypass ended.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Bel Air bypass ended. So like I said, instead of coming at an angle, it was a T intersection. Alright, so we're coming up on it. Up here on the right, you will see what was the old roller rink. It's been converted into like a office building. And then just past these houses, in the trees, is where the original bypass stopped. So there's the rink, is now what it's called. And then through the trees is where the original intersection was. And that's where it was from 1965 to like 2000. And now it comes at more of an angle and continues north.
Okay.
All right, Hickory.
Okay. Next part.
And then we can move on to 40.
Well, that'll be the last thing we got to do.
Yeah?
So. Yep. Still on business one.
Now we're coming up on Maryland 23 East-West Highway again. And like I said, interestingly, before the Hickory bypass was built, East-West Highway ended slightly west of here. It curved and went southward and ended at, you either took Granary Road or Bynum Road if you wanted to continue further east, or you could go south and it would loop you into the southbound Bel Air bypass. All right, see the steeple on the left? That's St. Ignatius Church. Also hidden in the trees. You can see the cemetery and a little bit of the historic church there. And then Jarrettsville Road. So now Jarrettsville Road is the old 23. And some people will, and I realize that this ages me by saying this, right? Some people will still call it old 23 or new 23. Or as Mike and I like to call it, 923.
Hey, we have 924, so why not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although, old 23 hasn't been 23 since like the mid-50s. Straight ahead, you'll see as we get to the curve, that's the old Central Consolidated School, now Hickory Elementary School.
Okay.
A traffic light that has never been activated.
Is that right? It's always been...
Flashing, yes.
Flashing yellow.
So it was part of the development of a grocery store that never ended up going in.
Oh.
Now this is 543, Addy Road and Fountain Green Road, although up here there was an old alignment of Fountain Green Road. Not that it matters since now used right here. It's like... But originally, yes, they were staggered. And Fountain Green Road had a different number. But eventually they were brought together and then all given the number 543. All right.
Junction US 1, and that's where this old alignment ends, and that, of course, is the northern terminus of US 1 business.
Yeah.
So that is the scoop on US 1, at least in video form.
Yes. Oh, yeah, Mike brought up something really funny that I didn't mention. But I'll say it anyway. So, there was this is really funny. So, when we were at the intersection of Business 1 and 23, there was a car dealership. What's funny is that lot initially had a church on it. The church moved to become part of the car dealership. To be sold to the car dealership. Then the car dealership eventually vacated, and now there's a different church there. In the car dealership. Everything...
The more things change, the more they
stay the same. Yeah.
Alright, you ready for Route 40?
Ready, Freddy.
Okay, let's do it.
Yes. Ooh, we're starting kind of into Baltimore County a little bit. I like this.
Yeah, we're starting at 43.
Yes.
Yep. Again, we're going to head, well, US 1 is signed as north-south, even though it does have more of an east-west route to it in Harford County. But US 40 is an east-west route, and we're going to head east.
Up here, you see another sign for Gunpowder Falls State Park. So up here at the intersection of Ebenezer Road, if you were to take that to the right and follow that to the end at Grace's Quarters Road, you can go to the beach. Gunpowder Falls State Park, Hammerman area.
Mm-hmm.
And then not too far from there is Marshy Point Nature Center, which we just passed the sign for.
Yeah. I think the thing that you notice right off the bat here is how different US 40 is, both design-wise and also development-wise. 40 from its inception on Pulaski Highway has been a divided 4-lane highway. And it's been the more commercial and the more suburban corner of the county.
Yeah.
So with the road meet coming up in 2 weeks, do you have stops finalized for that, or like what are we?
I haven't finalized all the stops yet.
Okay.
But there will be stops, and we'll check out some of the things, places that I'm thinking for stops. Well, obviously the first stop is going to be at the we're going to start the tour at the lock house of the Susquehanna and Tidewater Canal in Havre de Grace. We're basically going to drive US 40. So we're going to do the opposite direction of this video, but we're going to start with doing the old alignment in Havre de Grace, and then doing US 40, and making our way into Baltimore County, then going north to check out the Jericho Covered Bridge. Then we're going to head north on US 1. I still need to figure out how exactly I want to do the business route with also doing the bypass. So still need to finalize that in the coming days. Need to finalize all the exact stops. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I will say this much, there will definitely be a stop on Main Street, Bel Air.
I'd be disappointed if there wasn't. I also hope that the Jericho Covered Bridge will be involved somehow.
Oh, it is. So I'm not sure if we're going to be able to stop because there's going to be a major event there that day. So it may just have to be a pass through and, to jump out or hang your head out the car window and take a quick picture sort of thing. We may not be able to do a multi-car stop because there's not going to really be a place to, park a dozen cars. Because if there's an event going on at Jerusalem Mill.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, it's another Harford 250 event.
Is it really?
Yes.
Well, you've got sway at the town level. You can just kick them out, Like, hey, listen, you. We're bloody road geeks, man. We're way more important than you.
I do plan on stopping at the Jocelyn Gorsuch house.
Okay.
And talking about that. Want to stop at the Conowingo Dam. And then to make our way back towards Havre de Grace, I want to take us through Susquehanna State Park and to check out that crossing that I was telling you about. There's a old toll house there where the old bridge crossing was between Lapidum and Port Deposit.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of options as far as stops are concerned.
Oh yeah, The hard thing is,
narrowing it down.
Yeah.
Right.
There's just so many great places. Now we're about to cross Little Gunpowder Falls, and look at this. So this area is known as both Joppa and Joppa Town. So
welcome to Harford County.
Welcome to Harford County, by the way. Yes. If you were to take a right here, let me pull up the correct notes. Basically, what's very interesting is that the original site of the colonial town of Joppa is there along the Gunpowder, but also Joppa Town was a 1960s planned community. Basically, the Panitz Brothers Company built more than 1,400 houses, developed Joppa Town as an early planned community with retail, recreation, schools, and a mix of housing, some on the waterfront. And apparently, Mr. Panitz created Joppa Town at the urging of James Rouse, the famed developer of Columbia, and a friend of Panitz. Mr. Rouse said, "You fellas ought to build a new town," recalled Stanley Panitz. Now, he got my brother so excited about it that he went out and did it. So, this area is known as Joppa as well. It's Joppa as in more like the zip code of Joppa. And again, this is what's kind of interesting about the 40 corridor, right? Is that 40 is going to go through a lot of these areas that are incorporated areas as well as census designated areas. And look, here's Joppa Road. And basically going to so this is kind of where all these industrial and auto uses are. You're not going to see like the historic towns on 40. And you're not going to see like the suburban planned communities on 40 either. They're going to be off a bit. So but apparently the population of Joppa Town in the 2010 census was about 12,000.
Okay.
Up here, we're actually coming up on the intersection of Maryland 152, as well as on the right will be the old Lakeside Motel, which I said right now is a rehab facility, and unfortunately for those who love auto-oriented motel architecture, days are numbered. Again, don't know if we'll be able to see it too well from the road here. It's basically like right here. Yeah, you really can't see it. But that's where it is. Up here on the right, we have the southern precinct of Harford County Sheriff's Department. We passed the central precinct in the central office in the town of Bel Air. The northern precinct is in Jarrettsville. And now we're coming up on the area known as Edgewood. And so Edgewood is, again, one of these it's an unincorporated community. It has, when we see Maryland 755, you would take a right there and go a few miles, and that would take you to the original railroad settlement of Edgewood, as well as the old Edgewood Arsenal section of Aberdeen Proving Ground. So that was where the early Edgewood development was, and then eventually, post World War II, suburban development kind of made its way out here to 40. If you were to make a right here, that would take you back to Edgewater Village, which is it's built, I think, in the 1960s or 70s. But yeah, so a lot more suburban style development in this part of Edgewood. But yeah, population, 2010 census was 25,562. And I realize I should have gotten 2020 numbers, but hey, can't be perfect.
That's okay.
It's okay. Just trust me, these areas have not changed all that much. We haven't had major, population booms or busts. Steady growth.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so basically Edgewood Arsenal. So we're coming up on the intersection of 755. But Edgewood Arsenal was basically where the United States government built federally owned plants to manufacture toxic gas, including mustard gas and some other names of things that I'm going to botch.
Give it your best shot.
Chloropicrin and phosgene.
Oh, phosgene, yeah.
And separate facilities to fill artillery shells. We just went under Maryland 24, and as you'll see up here, we got a little jug handle in the state route system is Maryland 24D. This was meant to be a full interchange, as I showed you all on that 1969 plan. But as you can see lots of wetlands in this area. Swampy wetlands. That full interchange was not happening.
Yeah.
What's kind of interesting is this area is also sort of like considered Edgewood. That's the other thing about US 40, these very long, sprawling areas where the place names go for miles.
Mm-hmm. I think, for instance, the city limit of Aberdeen kind of stretches outwards.
Yes.
Like along Route 40, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
We're actually going to come up on the Bush River up here. And if we were so to the north of us, if we were on Maryland 7, that would be where Bush, Harford Town, is. And then, so here we are, we're coming up on it. And then if you were to look out along Bush River, that was where some of the even earlier settlements prior to Joppa were. So before you had the Baltimore we all know and love today, you had Old Baltimore. That was actually along the Bush River in the 17th century.
I guess that makes sense, because like the original settlement of Bush and all of that was in this area.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the settlement started, and then it gradually maybe not migrated, but other areas along the Upper Bay took on greater importance.
They did, and a big part of that was because of erosion and sediment, and a lot of these early Harford port towns, just filled in very quickly.
Oh, okay.
And became shallow very quickly, whereas the Patapsco River did not have that problem, and was also much better, protected. So. Long Bar Harbor Road, Otter Creek Road. If you go to like if you were to make right turns on these roads, you'd end up on some waterfront communities along the Bush River. If you were to have gone left back there, you would have gone towards towards Abingdon. And now, a mile away, 543 to 95. No 543 to Perryman.
No, unfortunately.
No. Well, fortunately or unfortunately.
I guess it depends on who you ask.
Yes. Now, something really cool. We're coming up on the area towards Belcamp. This area is known interchangeably as both Belcamp and Riverside. Basically, the postal code is Belcamp. That's the original name. Riverside is the name of the suburban development that came about 40, 50 years ago. Over here to the right used to be what was the Beta Shoe Factory. It was also a company town built in the style of Le Corbusier, where the European modern architecture. Unfortunately, that was all demolished about 2000 and early 2000s. You'll notice here a no left turn sign, but no road for Beta Boulevard. And you're like, wait, what? Why is that? It's because prior to them building the bridge and the flyover, 543 used to just come straight into 40.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In fact, there is still a piece of abandoned road.
On the other side of the...
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So, yep, here's 543. Riverside Parkway.
543, which, as you recall, ends up in Bel Air.
That's right, and it continues north almost all the way to Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the original Beta complex came from the ideas of the European Garden City concepts and the Bauhaus School. It included manufacturing and processing buildings, as well as residence for workers and management, and a building once containing a restaurant, post office, and community center. It was one of the last company towns of its kind in the state. But yes, that area is now being redeveloped as Water's Edge. Also, some beautiful housing along the waterfront there. They're building a new museum there, new STEM science museum that looks like it's going to be really cool. So some new development going on in Belcamp. Yep, we're coming up on, and again, you're not really going to be able to see it because it's to the south of us, is Perryman. And, as I mentioned before, it was well known for the canning industry, being along the railroad. Right here, this is Spasucia Road. That leads pretty much right to the heart of Perryman. Population was 2,342 at the 2010 census. Something else that's really important, worth noting about Perryman, and about the lands that now include Aberdeen Proving Ground, is that's where a lot of the that's where the plantations were. That's where the fertile farmland was in Harford County until 1917, when the federal government bought all the land and put the proving ground there. And we're about to intersect up here with Old Philadelphia Road. But anyway, what's interesting is that, and this is sort of like forgotten history, right? Because we don't think about it, because we think of APG, we think of the military history, we kind of forget what was there before, right? So you had plantations Then after the Civil War, you had tenant farming. So then when the land was bought up by APG, then the freed black tenant farmers then continued to move further north into basically the Route 40 corridor. So Perryman is not just, these huge mega warehouses that are proposed to being built. It's not just that they're about to lose like their last bit of rural way of life south of 40, but it's also going to disproportionately affect African Americans in Harford County. And that really sucks. So we're coming up on Maryland 715, which, as you can see, Control City is Aberdeen Proving Ground. And again, only goes to the south. There's a bridge that goes, the other way to the north, but it just leads to like the Frito-Lay warehouse and a couple other things. It doesn't go anywhere. But what's interesting is there is a road. So there's a road that goes up the east side of Perryman that almost connects to Maryland 715. And the only thing holding it back is the federal government. So there is the potential, again, it's not a direct way for truck traffic to get, from 95 to Perryman. But there's sort of a system that's in place.
Okay. Aberdeen as a city has a population of about 16,000.
Yes.
Can I give a shout out to my favorite place in Aberdeen?
Yes.
Ripken Stadium.
Yay! Ripken Stadium! Go Ironbirds! The Aberdeen Ironbirds are our minor league baseball team here in Harford County, owned by Baltimore Orioles legend Cal Ripken Jr., who is an Aberdeen native, as are all of the Ripkens. At least, all the Ripkens that played for the Orioles. Interestingly, some of the Ripken extended family also lived in Bel Air. But yeah, so exciting stuff. I'm a huge Cal Ripken fan, but I mean,
I've heard that about you.
Yeah, who in Harford County isn't? I mean, I was 8 years old when he when he got the 21-31.
Okay.
Very magical moment for me.
Well, that was, and that was in 1995, I think.
Yes.
So it had a pretty significant importance because it was right after the strike that wiped out the World Series in 1994, and so there was a lot of animosity towards baseball in those days. So the Ripken milestone was one of those things that got people interested in baseball again.
Yeah.
And then there was the summer of '98 and the home run chase of that year, but it was sort of the beginning of baseball coming back, I think, officially.
Yes. Oh, we've got the Amtrak station. You can catch Amtrak here, the Northeast Regional Corridor. And also, this area was originally called Hall's Crossroads, because the land was initially granted by the 5th Lord Baltimore to Edward Hall. But then when the Philadelphia, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad came through and was scouting for an area for a woodering station in 1835, they picked Hall's Crossroads, which blew up into Aberdeen. And there's the sign for Ripken Stadium, use 22 West.
There it is.
There it is. And 22 East goes to Aberdeen Proving Ground. This part of 22 is the Aberdeen Thruway. So again, one of the few sections of the East-West Expressway to get built, but it's not limited access. There's traffic lights, and it's just that it's multi-lane highway. But yes, Aberdeen was named after Aberdeen, Scotland.
Oh, there's another community in Scotland called Aberdeen.
Yes.
Okay. Yep, and here's the train tracks on the right.
Yes. And I just realized that I did not point out, my apologies, I did not point out where the two restaurants were that I
Oh, we passed them
highlighted.
already?
Yeah, we passed them.
Okay.
One was outside Perryman and the other one was in Aberdeen.
You were too busy talking about Cal Ripken.
But yep, Maryland 132 coming back in. Another old alignment.
Mm-hmm.
We are now slowly making our way to Havre de Grace, which I don't actually know where they touch, but at some point
somewhere around here.
Somewhere around here, yeah. Ooh, I got the question, will Maryland 715 be clinched as part of the meet? I was not planning on it, only because with a large convoy, that might be a little awkward to suddenly have, like, multiple
Just
cars
kinda, like,
show up at the gate and be like, oh, we're just turning around.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with stuff like that.
Yeah, so that might be something you need to do on your own time.
Yeah.
But yeah, while we're at it, I'll talk a little bit about Havre de Grace.
Mm-hmm.
So Havre de Grace, was named after the port city of Le Havre, France, which in full was once Le Havre de Grace, French for Harbor of Grace.
I didn't know that was short for something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Population was about 13,000 in the 2010 census. Oh, this is where it peels off. Revolution Street is Maryland 7A. So it peels off into historic Havre de Grace. Basically, Havre de Grace was a huge crossroads. George Washington crossed through here. Count Rochambeau's troops camped here September 9th, 1781, after having crossed the Susquehanna River on their way to the siege of Yorktown, Virginia. General Lafayette spent a lot of time here. Mentioned previously, Frederick Douglass was here on his way to freedom. But yes, General Lafayette was the one who came up with the name.
Okay.
Yes. George Washington stayed overnight in the town on the journey to New York City for his first inauguration. And during the first Congress in 1789, Havre de Grace missed by only one vote being named the capital of the fledgling United States.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was a finalist for national capital.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
National capital. Could you imagine how different Harford County would be?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just, pretend we're Montgomery County instead, I guess.
I guess, right?
Yeah, well, not even. Bel Air would even be like Northwest DC.
Yeah.
It's just like hard to believe how.
Because real quick on that, they always wanted to put the capital somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic because it was central to where the 13 states were at the time. So it made sense to put it in the Maryland, Virginia general area. So they kind of, before they settled on where they ultimately settled, they looked into northeastern Maryland also.
Yeah. Oh, there's Chesapeake Grill, where our meat lunch is going to be in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember if I've ever actually been there or not.
I don't know.
I haven't gone there with you, right?
No.
No.
Here is the crazy intersection with Maryland 155.
Yeah, so this is where traffic skipping the toll on the Tidings Bridge in favor of the Hayden Bridge Pass toll will turn left.
Yes.
Alright, so here is the Hayden Bridge itself. We have that beautiful electronic toll gantry that we're passing underneath.
All right, here we go.
It's an interesting bridge because it has two main sections to it, separated by, what was it, Garrett's Island?
Yep, Garrett Island. Yep.
The two superstructures are more or less the same, and they each cross one channel of the river.
Yep.
But as we cross the bridge and leave Harford County, we are going to be closing up shop here in a few minutes.
We are.
So if anybody has any last minute questions, comments that they would like us to address live, now's a good time to let us know.
Oh, no, we're not having the meat lunch at the Waffle House, although I suppose that...
I advocated for that, by the way.
I suppose if anybody from out of town is coming in early or leaving late, we could definitely make that a super late dinner, early breakfast. You know, Waffle House is 24 hours. We could go whenever.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah. So, last call for any questions?
And my computer is starting to buffer for some reason.
Oh no. In the last 53 seconds.
Yeah, so I think we'll have to kind of cut it off here. But I think you get the idea. As we enter Cecil County, this is where the old toll plaza was on the Cecil County side. And we come to the traffic light up here with Maryland 222, and that is going to be where we end today's video.
Yeah?
222 again was once upon a time a part of US 222. This was a historic southern terminus before it was relocated just a few miles up the road to Conowingo Dam. Well, final thoughts out of you, Laura, before we sign off?
Yeah, I thank you so much for doing this episode with me. It's really fun for me to be able to share my home county and my hometown with y'all. And I hope that I also got to teach y'all a little bit of history, show you all some cool little gems. Feel free if there's any questions you think of later, or if you're not watching this live and you think of something, go ahead and leave us a comment.
Drop us a comment, like this video, and if you liked what you saw, feel free to subscribe, because I'm sure there will be plenty more where this came from, even though we're not going to do episodes on our Harford 250, every day, every month for the rest of the time. There will be other content featuring other highways and other major cities around America. So if you like this format of presentation, feel free to check us out. You can check out all the other shows that we've done. On my channel homepage, there's a section devoted to playlists, and we have a live content section on that homepage where you can find our other live shows that we've done over the last, 3 years now, 3.5 years, something like that.
Well, we started them. So my daughter is, so for anybody new listening, my daughter's almost 4, and we started them in 2019. The same year that I gave her.
I think we did the first one right around when she was born.
Yeah.
Yeah. which is kind of wild to think about. Yeah. Yep. I know. Well, Laura, thank you so much for being a part of this. This was a lot of fun to do.
Thank you so much, Dan. This was really fun. And like I said, it was so cool to be able to share all kinds of history with y'all. The road history, the architectural, the cultural history, everything.
Absolutely. And certainly look forward to the next live show, and next live show with you, and next show with you folks in the live chat. So you have been listening to a live episode on the Roadway Wiz YouTube channel. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. And until the next one, we'll catch you next time. Travel safe, be safe, all that good stuff. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.